Hello everyone, today we will make leveling up possible in our MMORPG so that we have the opportunity to get stronger in the game. So let's create a new account and start from there. Maybe pick door size and maybe a white color, or maybe door size. And then we are able to see our level, which is level 1 because this is a new account, and we see our XP bar, and each of those bars represent 5% of a level up. The XP bar also shows that we have 0 experience points out of 32 which we need to level up, and each of those flowers will give us 5 XP to our level up. So we get 5 XP, our XP bar will update itself. The XP bar itself is the same bar as our health bar, so there's no trick there. We just picked our health bar, used it on top of an image as a shader for the image because it's in the UI, and the health bar in our game is actually a sprite, but we will check out how to do that in a minute. And currently we can gain experience points, and if we check, we have 25 out of 32, and when we re-log in, then obviously the backend has also saved the value, and we still have 25 out of 32, and we are still level 1. We can level up real fast, and our fireball does roundabout 83 damage, and we just leveled up. There's no big level up animation, we have to do that, but we actually leveled up, and our damage should already increase because it's 84 now. There's some variance in the damage, so it could be that the variance triggered higher now, but we will do more damage because the level up is in our damage calculation, is considered in our damage calculation, and we are level 2 now, and those flowers here are level 1, so we get a small increase in damage there. And we could all the way level up to, I think I configured it to level 50 or 60. But for now, obviously later flowers won't do. Maybe level 3 is still possible with flowers. We need 128 XP, that's doable. While I do that here, I see that the flowers still need spawn in animation like other players and everything. But we will implement that later. Today we will just talk about this experience, gaining experience points and gaining level ups, because it on the Unity side is pretty straightforward, because we have our health bar, which is able to split the bar within certain values, and in this case every 50 it's splitted, and 1000 is the value for the full health bar. So we have a percentage with one decimal number, and we push that up to match 1000, and every 50 we have a bar, so we have 20 bars at the bottom, which is quite easy to do with our health bar, because the health bar just is able to do that. The tricky thing is, now we are level 3, our fireball should even do more damage. The tricky thing is the architecture in the backend, because who saves the experience points is one big question, and how do we propagate all these information? So 89, our fireball increased. So first of all, leveling up makes the game so much more engaging and fun to play, because this is the first time in our game where we actually gain something which makes us stronger. But let's check out the source code. For me, it was pretty clear that saving experience points would be part of the character. So I think the character service is a really good place to do the saving and everything. So I created an XP message, which is pretty straightforward. It just says how much XP does the player gain. And then when an XP message comes in, so every other service can send the player has gained experience points, those experience points will be saved to your account. So that's pretty straightforward. So you get experience points via Redis. Everyone can send a message to player experience prefix, which is just XP and a dash, and your player ID. And when one service sends this message, then this function here is called. Then we get the current information that is saved within our database. We add the experience points, and then we do a little bit of math. But let me first talk about concurrency here. It is very unlikely that so much experience point messages come in that our Redis will call this function twice pretty much at the same time. The reason for that also is that this workflow is per player, so each player connected to the character service will create an instance of this workflow, and this workflow just listens to basically messages for itself. And this Redis pub/sub subscribe is in this regard synchronized. So this is like a queue that gets in there. That's a little assumption that I made, and when we play test that, and it will hold not true that this assumption is true and this function is actually triggered multiple times. The solution is quite simple. On XP gain will feed a queue, and we will make this function check the queue and will process the queue. Then this is 100% safe that we want to never call this function twice again. Another thing we could do, we could log here and end the log at the very bottom. This would work pretty much the same. So we have already two solutions in place if our assumption isn't true. But in my current tests, which aren't sufficient enough, because I'm always testing at least with myself or with one or two friends, this is not enough load on the system to find out those things. But even if that's that we have an issue there, it's really easy to fix, and it's really easy to find out, because the player will lose experience points. Because when we get here twice and we read the state of the player, and he should gain 2 times 5 experience points, but he only gains it once because the second call overrides the first call without reading the experience gain there, then we know we have an issue. Another way of doing that would be to cache the XP value and just save it every 10 seconds or something to the database, which it might be a good plan if we have a lot of concurrent players, and to get some load out of the database, because we don't actually need to save that often, but that's really something for the future. So we do experience gain. We check if with our experience curve, which is a very simple helper class, we configure max level and we configure a curve mod, and we use a pretty simple curve, pretty close to New World's curve, which had a default curve mod of 32, if you remember the last video. And then we just do level exponentially by 2. And this gives us those beautiful values, and we could also modify the curve mod depending on which level we want to be able to achieve easier and harder, like we saw in the last video. And this gives us 2 values. The diff experience is actually the experience points the player needs to level up. So it's the 32 from 1 to 2, and it's the 128 from 2 to 3, which we saw. And the full experience points is basically the difference experience points accumulated. So for 1 to 2, it's still 32, but for 2 to 3, it's not 128, it's 160. Because it's the 32 plus the 128. The reason why we need the full experience points, it makes calculating some things easier. First of all, like you see, we always save the full experience points the player has ever collected. There are different ways to implement that. We could also just, when the player reaches a level up, remove those experience points from the player. But it's, in my opinion, better to save the full experience points that a player has accumulated. For example, if you let your player at the end, he's max level, but you want to still let him gain experience points, and if you increase the max level, you want to give him those level ups. That is easier to be done when you save the fully accumulated experience points. So there's one thing that I want to do, which is I want to merge those ifs, and I want to do a while here. Because if we do the if like we did, then the player can always only gain 1 level up with 1 experience gain, which might not be the case. So with a while loop, we retry till the player gets the level up he deserves. So what we check that the player is not max level, because when a player is max level, we don't do anything with level up. This is basically the level up check. And at the end, we save to the database that did the experience gain and the level up. And we check the player is not max level, and then we check that the player has more XP accumulated than he's needed for a level up. C.level is its current level, and we get the full XP, like I said, which is the fully accumulated XP. And if his currently accumulated XP is greater or equal than the full XP he needed to level up, then obviously he will level up. And when he will level up, some certain things will happen. First of all, we send the player character, which is a function which sends to the client the current player status, just to the player that has done the level up, because currently you can't see the level of other players. So the only one interested in this information is the player itself. And we sent him the character token. We already had a function for that, because the player can configure its character and gets his own information and everything. And we just change some values and update the client about that. The next thing we want to do is inform our other services that the level up of this player has changed. It's very important, for example, for combat service to know the level of the player, because the combat service needs to know when the level has changed to be able to do the damage calculation with the new level of the player. And here's actually already a simple bug, because we send the update and then we save to the database. And if we check how this is developed, when we do find usages on this type, we will find a subscription. and the subscription on jar update in our combat workflow will load the information from the database. And we send this update before we save to the database, which is not a good idea. So let's save a value, update other services, which is false, and if we want to send the update, it will become true. And after we saved, we do, if we need to update the other services, then we will send a message. And maybe it's also a good idea to wait for the database, and instead of fire and forget, which just does that, we can do .wait. So we wait for the repository to be saved completely, and after that we will update the other players, which is way cleaner to do. So then we update, and we already have seen that only combat service is interested in that. Then let's jump over to combat service. So when the combat service gets a token, which basically is the login of the player against the combat service, he gets the token, he reads the player ID out of the token, then he does update char info. Update char info is reading the player data out of the database. And when this char update comes from the character service, then also we need to update our local cache of char info. And this is everything we do. And the same with the character service, this combat workflow is instantiated per player. So when the player connects to it, it sends its token, and these local variables are for the player itself. So it's pretty fine to have this local cache of character information here. And then we can use the character information like we want to, because we have those information in place. There's also on experience gain here, which sends the experience points to the player, that the experience points that the player has got experience points. After thinking about that now, I don't think that is needed here, because what we can do currently, we have to make a decision. Currently, combat service will send to the client experience points has been gained, but later we want other services also to be able to send the client, you have gained experience points. And so it might be better to give this task one higher up instead of the combat service. And it's also a good idea to give this to someone who actually already saves this data, because it's always a good idea to have the one who saves this data also send this data to the client, because he's most likely the most important one on this regard. So let's remove the unsubscribe also. So the combat workflow is not interested anymore in the experience points gain. Sorry for the fixes. Some things after you re-see the source code, you might want to change something, because I'm developing and this is a work in progress, and after rereading the code now, I rethink about it, and might be, if you look at your code 1 or 2 days later and you find something odd or strange, then first maybe you should comment the code, and second maybe you should rethink this part of the code, because sometimes you're just hacking away and it's working, but it's not really good developed, happens to everybody. Then maybe you want to rethink that. And that's what I do here currently. So I want the character workflow to send the experience point thing. Then we need to update our client, because we have written the clients on the server side also. Unity just consumes them, because the combat workflow most likely will read the experience points message like here, and this moved to the character workflow. So the character workflow will now do that. And since we're using pub sub within Unity, it doesn't matter who publishes this message, if it's the character workflow or the combat workflow. On Unity side, we don't have to change anything, which is always a good design. So when we gain experience points now, the character service will also send to the client that the experience points message. So the client knows to show this little +5 and update the bar at the very bottom. And the client only gets the full character information after a level up, which is good, I guess. So let's go back to the combat service. The combat service now has the information that the player has leveled up, and he needs to, when a player casts a spell or something, then the combat service will add the character level to the caster stats. Currently, the player can't increase its other stats like attack or something. He just increases level. The rest stays the same. So that's why we just read the level for now. And then it will send the message that a spell has been casted. The reason why we do it that way, because we could also on the damage receiver read the level of the player who attacks it. This is getting more complicated, because first of all, this workflow exists per player, so it's really easy to cache a value for each player in this workflow. And the damage receiving part doesn't really want to understand that a player exists in the world. The flowers are not interested in that a player exists. And as long as that's the case, and we can have this this relationship between those two, that the flowers are not interested in the player, it's really easy for the flowers to scale in their own isolated world, which is great. And that's why we do in the player instance thing the player cache. And we inform with this message, in this case it's the flowers, we inform them you will receive damage by a character with this level. And again, if we do find all references, we will find someone who subscribes to that. First of all, this is our map workflow, which sends the effect to the players, so that everyone who is near the player casting the skill will see the skill effect happening. And we will have our property management service, which manages the flowers in this case. Also inform that the message a skill has been casted. We already have that implemented in previous videos. But now the damage calculation also provides the caster stats, which has the level of the player within, and if we follow the caster, then we see here level difference. The calculation we have done in previous videos and everything, so I won't go over it, but now we provide the right information for that. And the props already have stats, so this is configured in our game design. There we have the spawner configured, and the spawner has some stats here, prop stats. Yeah, it's config actually. There we have it configured. All flowers are level 1. So our damage calculation is updated, and on backend side we save the level and experience points and we inform the client about it. So we have made some changes. Let's first of all test if we didn't mess something up, which obviously can always happen. So it's always a good idea after you make some changes to do a retest. If you make too big changes and do a retest after that, it might be harder to find where the issue is, but we just changed a couple of lines of code and we will see. Let's log in with our created account. There you go. We should see the XP bar. We are level 3, we have 20 XP. And we changed how XP is sent to the player, but to the client, but still it looks like Unity will display everything correctly, which is great. Now we need to check how everything is done in Unity side. First of all, I updated the HUD. If I hide this background and we see the HUD, I drawn this XP pen at the very bottom, which has an XP gain which just says +5, but the value could change here. That's no problem. The value is set by the script, and it displays itself, and after 5 seconds I guess it hides itself. Then we have this level display, which just shows the level, which is currently default to 5, but obviously when the character information comes in, it will update that. And then we have this level border, which is this black border, and then we have our, which is this gray border of level up, and then we have this level background, which is the black value here. We could make the level text part of that, but doesn't matter honestly, because it goes from top to bottom. Might be a better idea to organize that to cleaner. Let's do that. So we have border, background, and the level text, and we have the experience points border, which is the black border here, and then we have the experience bar, and the experience bar has an image with a material on it, and this material is our shader for the health bar basically. So we have this XP bar material which does our shader graph health bar, which has a color of yellow, empty color of gray, which we see here, and the splitter size and everything correctly configured. And after you put that on an image, then the image will render with our shader like the sprite in the health bars. We have a video where we created this shader, so I don't want to go more deep into that. I just wanted to show that the shaders actually be able to get used in the UI, which is great. So this shader needs to be configured because the health value is the actual value and the max health value is the max health. We might want to change that to have value and max value or something, but because this is not health, this is experience points, but we can run with that for now, I guess. And then we have this text which just shows the values, and this is everything binded within a panel to be able to organize things here in the window. We don't need that panel, but it's better to organize things this way. So then on this panel we have a little XP bar controller, which when you want to update the XP bar, it will calculate how much of the bar needs to be filled. It's basically simple percentage math. We check if our current level is below 1, which shouldn't be the case, but if the current level is 1, then the experience needed till here is 0, or else we could ask our experience curve for the previous level how much experience was needed to get here. The problem is our experience curve starts with level 1, so the full XP doesn't have an entry for current level 0. So when we search how much XP did we need to get to level 1, this function doesn't provide that. There are two ways to fix this. One would be to add this value to full XP, which would be easy, or to make this little check, which is also easy. So we check if we are currently level 1, and if that's the case, then the XP needed to get to level 1 is obviously 0. If we are higher, then we can ask the XP curve how much XP was needed for the previous level. Then we get the XP needed. We remove the experience points that we needed to get here from the experience points that the player has accumulated over his whole playtime. Then we get the experience earned till next level. So this way we can check that against the experience needed till the next level, which is basically for the current level the diff XP value. And if the experience till next level gets lower than 0, then we want to set it to 0. So when does this happen? This is a pretty edge case. Let's say the player is getting to level 2 and has collected those 32 experience points and just went to level 2, and he needed 32 experience points. Now our game design decided you get way too fast to level 2. You need 40 experience points instead of 32 experience points to get to level 2. And then we don't want to update all of our database. In this case, the player has minus experience points. He is level 2 and we won't take away that. We will not take this away from him. But he has accumulated not enough experience points to get to level 2. So he actually has minus 8 experience points here, but this will mess up our UI, so we set it to 0. Let's hope this case will never trigger anyway. So then we update the text value because we know how much experience points the player has accumulated to get to the next level, and we know how much he needs. So we can update the text. That's what we do. Then we calculate the percentage of the bar. If this one is 0, then the bar. If this one is 1, then the bar is fully filled, and if it's 0, it's fully empty. So, like I said, max value for our bar is 1000. So we get this percentage value, multiply that by 1000, and we have the value that we need to feed into display in our progress bar. And obviously if the value is greater than 1000, something has gone wrong, but even if something has gone wrong, I don't want to destroy the UI, I still set it to 1000, which means the bar is full. And then we set the XP bar, which just checks that the XP bar is initialized, and if that's the case, then we set health, which is the value of the XP bar in this case, to our value here, and 1000 is full and 0 is empty, and everything between that is everything between. And since this could happen when the bar is not initialized, then also when we initialize the bar, we will also set this value. This is a good practice in Unity to do that, to be able to have your component work with data and also get initialized later. Because when you're working with awake and start, it's not always that easy to understand which components gets awakened first over the other, because when you're developing this UI, you just want to crank in the components and you want them to work. And so it would be really good to have your components be robust against late initialization and everything. And that's what we have here. So another component could call update XP a lot of times, even though the XP controller is not awake now. And after it's awake, it will display the right thing. This is how, in my opinion, you should write components for Unity to have them as robust as possible. Else you will have some strange issues where you call this, but it's not awake now because maybe it's in disabled state. And then if you don't do this null check, then you get a null reference error and something like that. And you want to avoid that. I've seen Unity projects where people totally ignored those null reference errors because everything looks good, and it will backfire sooner or later. So write your components as robust as possible. So this will update the progress bar and the text. So this text and this progress bar will update, and the rest is in the HUD controller. I could write everything in the HUD controller, but I don't want this component to get super huge, so I tried to split out some parts here. And the only thing that is new to the HUD component is when experience points is gained. So we subscribe to get experience messages, which now come from the character service instead of from the combat service, but thanks to our architecture, it doesn't matter for us on client side. Then we save we have in context character, basically a local cache of our character information. And we add the experience gain there, because full character message only comes in when the player levels up. So, and when we log in. So we log in, then the backend will tell us you have X experience points and you are level whatever. And after that you get experience messages, which are reliable, so you will always get them. You will never miss out on one of them. And then the client can accumulate the experience points the player has itself, and the client also has the XP curve available, so he knows when a level up will happen. But even though he knows, a level up is basically a snapshot where the backend will send a full character information to the client. So even if they go out of sync a little bit here, there is a place where everything gets back synced, which is good. And it doesn't happen too often, which is also good. So full update only comes when a level up will happen. So we will show experience gain show and for 5 seconds, and we will show how much experience points the player has gained. We will talk about this one right after this component. And then we get the XP controller and update level and experience points like we saw. And this also happens when a level up has happened. And also when a level up has happened, we update the level text. Pretty straightforward. Would be a good idea to place some level up animation here, but I haven't done any now. But we will add that here because the full message only comes in after a level up, and since we know that, we know that this is our level up event basically. And let's really fast go over XP gain, because I made a new component which is auto hide info controller, which is a controller which you can send on any text, and you can display this text for X values. We could update this with image and everything and do more complicated things, but for now this is enough. So it will on show the text on the text field, which is straightforward. It will activate itself, and after a duration of time it will hide itself. So first of all, if a Q&Q routine is running, I stop it, which means it doesn't hide the value. Else you might have if you call this every second and it waits 5 seconds and it gets deactivated and activated by multiple occurrences of coroutines, you might have the issue that something is flickering and everything. It's ugly. So to get control over that, we stop everything that we have started, which might just be this one coroutine. And if that's the case, then we start the new coroutine. And the new coroutine will call deactivate myself after X seconds. So that's pretty easy to do in Unity. We return wait for seconds and how long we want to wait. This will wait our 5 seconds, and then this game object set active false is called, and we will hide our game object. And even though when another show comes in, it will activate the game object again and will do the coroutine. And the coroutine will again hide this game object again. So this component in itself works pretty well, and we just need to call it. That's what we do when we get experience points. So the only thing that changed also on other parts is in our context we had string name, which just was the name of the current player, and now we have the full character information cached in here. So we can check when this is set. So when we get the character message, then the framework behavior which initializes all clients will save this context. So, and after we get again a character message and the current character is not null and the name is equal to the current character name, then we got a level up and an update on our cache. So some strange things will happen now, because it might be the case that everyone who listens to on character message will get the message before the framework behavior, and then the cache is not updated. So this would be bad, but currently the framework works like who registered first will get the message first, and framework behavior gets the message first. If that's not the case in the future, currently it's the case, and it will stay the case if we don't change our framework, which we not plan to do. But also there might be a good idea to make a new message, for example, get a message that inherits from character message and make it for example UI character message, and the framework behavior at the end will publish it here and here after the context has been updated. And if he publishes the UI character message, the other who are interested in this message could, instead of go for character message, go for UI character message, and then they have all data they need at the right time. Maybe in the future we need to get the flow correct here, but for now the flow is correct because everything is called in the order of registration. But who knows? Still, we have options. If this will become an issue, we know how to solve that, and we have to observe that. So, and this is everything that we basically needed to do to create a character level up. I wish you all a great weekend, and I want to thank my patron Julian, who's helping me to get this project going. Thanks, bye.